Hi, my name's Noel Hardy, and I love to play video games. I've been playing games since elementary school when I started with Minecraft, and these many years of experience have taught me the difference between a good game and a bad game. There are several ways to tell a good game from a bad game, and often it just comes down to the company behind the game. In many instances, games produced by smaller companies that are like, less companies, more like 4 or 5 friends working on a game together, are often far better than those produced by massive corporations. And, well, that's the gist of this video essay, and before I go further, I'd like to take a moment to define some terms and to go over the format I'm going to be using. AAA. These games are most distinguished by their massive development and marketing budgets. They're meant to be a game development company's best work and provide a high-quality video game experience, comparable to a summer blockbuster. Indie games. An indie game is short for independent video game, is typically created by an individual or small development team, without the financial and technical support of a large game publisher. The developers also tend to be a bit more passionate since they're creating it out of the want to create a game instead of just to make money. Gameplay loop. The loop of actions that occur while playing a part of a game. Generally, the better the gameplay loop, the more fun the game is. If two games have the same gameplay loop, but one has a poorly constructed engine, that one will generally be less fun. Procedural generation. In games, procedural generation is used by developers to automatically generate large amounts of content, such as a game world or, dungeon loot. This is done to give larger variety in the game's world and to give more replayability. Destiny is a shining example of what a AAA game is capable of, given the right development team. Destiny has been going on strong for 7 years now, with at least 3 more years left in its lifespan. It has had consistent updates that all can expand upon the base game since its release. It has a solid and genuinely fun gameplay loop that is focused on satisfying and rewarding gunplay, that rewards unique and interesting weapons, all on top of a beautiful story that is best described as a space opera. I mean, heck, the current antagonist, Savathun, has been built up since The Forsaken, back in 2007. But what initially set Destiny apart, and what still gives it its unique identity to its day, is its various raids, which are large, multi-encounter challenges that require 6 people to take on, such as King's Fall, Wrath of the Machine, Leviathan, Last Wish, Scourge of the Past, and the Vault of Glass, of which I've actually used for the background footage. Deep Rock Galactic is a 4-person cooperative horde shooter that shows exactly what happens when the developers really put their heart into the project. The premise behind Deep Rock Galactic is that you are a dwarf on the hostile alien planet of Hoxes. You are there to mine minerals and resources, all while fighting off massive and varied swarms of giant bugs known as glyphids. One of the hardest things about this game is actually trying to figure out what makes it so much fun to play. And yes, that sounds like a cop-out, but it is true. Like, no one I have asked could properly put their finger on what makes Deep Rock Galactic so good, and it's honestly just refreshing to see in a game. And even though I couldn't narrow it down to what makes it fun, I can still share what makes it a good experience, and why I should keep an eye out for, and what you should keep an eye out for in other games. Deep Rock Galactic has a solid identity to it. It has top-tier sound design, because you can tell what threats face you without even needing to see them. Each of the 4 classes mesh perfectly together, each complementing the other's strengths and covering their weaknesses. Fallout 76 is a great example of what to avoid in a video game. Fallout, historically, is known for having great single-player games that focus on story and world building. Fallout 76 is a Fallout game in name alone. It completely departs from what makes Fallout as a series great, opting for an exclusively online experience that banks on the players themselves being the game's vendors and quest givers, which does not work on a fundamental level. On top of that, to this day, 3 years after the game's release, there are still dozens of game-breaking bugs and exploits. In the hour that I played, the only fun I had was in the character creator, where I tried to make my character look like Waluigi from the Mario games. I will, however, give the Fallout games, as a whole, props for their excellent music, as they use actual music from the 50s and 60s, which you could have heard on the radio, such as The Wanderer or I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire, which I sadly can't play for fear of copyright. Got Starbound is an interesting game, to say the least. It is set far in the future in a universe filled with different races and procedurally generated aliens and worlds that you will end up seeing over and over and over again. Starbound is a great example of how not to use procedural generation. With terrain generation that hasn't changed since the beta, despite the various changes to how your character moves throughout the world. The gameplay loop isn't really there, truth be told, as the actual story that, Starbound possesses boils down to go to this planet, try to find a settlement. If you find one, scan for important relics, and then go into an I'll admit it's a pretty fun dungeon, and then you go kill a boss. Not to mention the game's not the best, as you can see in the gameplay I have playing in the background. Yes, that is how the game plays, and it doesn't get much better. Minecraft is an interesting game in terms of qualifying as a AAA game or an indie game, because throughout its lifetime, it has been both, and it truly highlights the best of both worlds. It started off as an indie game back in 2009 and stayed as such until 2015, when Minecraft was bought by Microsoft for $2.5 billion. From 2009 to 2015, Minecraft's primary developer, Notch, created what is essentially a blank canvas for the player to explore and bend to their whims. And after it was bought, however, the developer finally had tools Minecraft into the best game of the 21st century, which, to the point where it's hard pressed to find a kid who does Minecraft is. One of the best things about gaming is the good friends you can make and the experiences you guys all share. And it's important to have fun while you play, which is part of the reason I made this video, is to help you find what games are good, what games aren't so good. And before I go, I'd like to give a quick shout out to my friends, Maureen and Xander, for helping me create this video, and